Chapter 9. The Plan. Sora led a sleepy Kairi away from the bridge of the highway, towards the cabin where there were 3 doors that were arrayed in a semicircular pattern on the side. She dimly noticed there was a large comfy couch in the center, behind a large television set with surround sound, and several DVD and game consoles spread around it. Sora led her to the door on the right. "This can be your room," he said softly, as to not hurt her ears in her drowsy state. "There's a nice queen-size bed inside and an adjacent bathroom. There is also a door into the center room, which is mine. If you need anything, I'll be right next door." Kairi nodded slowly in understanding. "Thanks, Sora," she said, before releasing a yawn that stretched ear to ear. "Good night." He lightly pecked her cheek before she entered her room with a whoosh. "Good night, Kairi," he whispered. She nodded her head before stumbling towards her bed, the door closing behind her. It was too dark to see, but she snuggled under the blankets and instantly fell into a deep, peaceful slumber. Kairi woke the next morning when the lights automatically turned on. She winced and pulled the covers over her head, opting for a few more minutes of sleep. 10 more minutes, Mom," she thought lazily, her eyes shut tight. "Come on, sleepyhead," Nominee prodded. "It's 8:15. Sora's already been up for the last half hour making breakfast." Kairi admitted defeat and yawned widely, pulling the blue covers off her. "That's sweet of him," she thought before examining her room. In one glance she knew it had to have been Donald's. It was blue almost everywhere, with spare staffs and wizard hats lying around, with a great big portrait of a female duck wearing a purple dress on the wall. Kairi walked up to the door. "All that blue will have to go," she thought as the door opened for her with a whoosh. Yeah, no more blue. Now go and get a spot of breakfast." One problem," Kairi thought while looking around the cabin, puzzled. "Where's the kitchen?" Before Nominee could answer, Kairi could smell eggs and bacon, the scent wafting from down the hallway. A dreamy look came over her face as her nose led the way. The hallways had a plain, cold steel floor that chilled her bare feet as she ran her fingers along the interior of the red hole. It seemed a little gloomy at first, but Kairi then noticed there were many end tables bolted to the floor with vases full of colorful flowers clamped onto them. She turned her nose away from the smell of breakfast for a moment that transpired up to smell a particularly pretty group of flowers. Kairi inhaled deeply, the sweet perfume of the flowers invigorating her. She looked up to see a painting of a white castle with blue roofs on its many towers and bailey. Kairi was still gazing at the painting when Sora came out of the nearest doorway with a white apron on. He spotted her and ambled in her direction. Kairi looked and smiled when she heard his footsteps, toes ringing on the metal floor. "Morning," he said lightly, scooping her up in his arms and kissing her. Or he would have been able to kiss her had Kairi not been giggling madly as he held her off the floor. "Sora," she began sweetly, "are you always like this in the morning?" He grinned. "Only when I'm with a pretty girl," he responded, finally achieving the kiss he desired as Kairi ceased her giggling. "But I'm not ready yet," she pouted as they broke apart. Sora grinned as he set Kairi back on her feet. "You're always beautiful," he whispered, pecking her cheek. Kairi turned back to the painting. "Sora," she asked, "what is this place?" Sora stopped gazing at her face, turning to the painting. "Oh, that's a painting of Disney Castle," he replied before raising his fingers to his chin. Donald seemed to know a fair amount about it. I can't remember much of what he said. Quickly, a transparent Roxas ran out of the kitchen, making a beeline for Sora. "Sorry to interrupt this art history lesson," he panted, "but Sora, the bacon is burning." Sora's eyes grew wide as he dashed off into the kitchen, cursing under his breath. Kairi giggled as she saw him race through the doorway. Roxas shook his head, a smile on his face. "Roxas," Kairi inquired, slowly ambling towards the doorway with Roxas accompanying her, "why is Sora wearing an apron?" Roxas barked a laugh. "Oh, Sora had to spend 10 minutes explaining that," he said as they walked through the doorway. "Something about Goofy trying to cook once and somehow getting grease all over both his and Donald's clothes. They began stained, of course, and Donald threw a fit, conjuring up aprons for all 3 of them when in use in the kitchen. I guess even without Donald, he has become ingrained in Sora to wear an apron while cooking." Kairi stifled a giggle as she observed Sora dashing about, saving his bacon, and setting the table for 2. The kitchen was really a kitchen/dining room. There was a pantry by the doorway and a black fridge on the other side. The white stove currently had a cooling frying pan on one of its burners, and there were a few dishes in the sink. A wooden counter was surprisingly clean and devoid of foreign articles. A mahogany table rested on the other side of the counter, already laden with scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast. A few padded chairs surrounded the table. Sora finished setting the table and untied his apron, tossing it expertly onto one of the 3 hooks by the spice rack. He pulled out a chair and motioned Kyrie to sit down as Roxas slipped back into his mind. She took the offered seat, and Sora sat down next to her. "How'd you sleep, Kyrie?" he asked before tucking into a piece of nice crispy bacon. Kyrie smiled as she swallowed her mouthful of toast. "I had a surprisingly good sleep," she said before her shoulders drooped, considering what happened last night. Sora noticed her shaky voice and looked at her in anxiety. "Don't dwell on that, Kyrie," he said, trying to comfort her. "It isn't a good habit to get into. We sealed the keyhole, and Riku and Yuffie won't let us down." Kyrie shook her head. "But what happens if there are too many Heartless and the islands are destroyed?" Sora shook her head, not catching her drift. "But the keyhole is sealed," he insisted. "The islands can't be destroyed again." Kyrie pounded her fists on the table, clattering the plates. "That isn't what I meant, Sora," she growled, her voice slowly sinking from one of frustration to despair. "What if the islands become completely overrun with Heartless, and all our friends and family are either killed or lose their hearts to them?" Tears were falling freely as she looked at Sora in desperation. "What happens if the town, the buildings, the trees, the plants, and even Palpu Tree are destroyed?" Sora's eyes grew wide in fear as he contemplated the new meanings of destruction of the islands. Images of his mother and friends lying dead floated through his eyes as the Heartless wandered freely around a burning and destroyed town. Tears welled up in his eyes as he began to see Kyrie in front of him again, standing on her feet. Sora rose from his chair and embraced Kyrie, her falling into his arms. "What happens if Kosek is too strong?" she sniffled. Sora rubbed her back, trying to comfort her when his own fear matched hers. "I don't know, Kyrie," he whispered, "but I'm scared." They broke apart, and she looked strangely at him. "Sora? Scared?" He sat down in his chair and placed his head in his hands. "I haven't been scared of any foe before," he explained weakly, "but she scares me. Nobody has ever had that effect on me before. Not even Sephiroth did." He shuddered, remembering her powers. Kyrie stood behind his chair and wrapped her arms around his neck, bringing her head next to his. "What did she do?" she asked him quietly. Sora gasped and clasped her hands in one of his before turning his head slightly in her direction, tears streaming from his cerulean eyes. He started. "She showed me images of you, Kyrie, images of you being tortured and dying, and while she was at it, she hurt me, like she was literally hitting my head with a sledgehammer. It felt as if it would last forever before it subsided. I don't know what happened to stop it, or if I can take that pain again." Kylie silently wept and rubbed her cheek sympathetically against Sora's, doing all she could to comfort him when someone spoke. "I do." Kyrie slowly spun her head and looked weakly in the direction her voice came from. Naminé was standing at the head of the table. Her voice was emanating concern, yet she was also smirking. "You may not have noticed, Kyrie," she began, "but when you were cradling Sora and I was holding Roxas, light came from our fingertips, healing and protecting them. You and Roxas don't have to bear the pain, Sora, as long as you have Kyrie with you." Kyrie sighed softly as she looked down at Sora. "Don't worry, Sora," she cooed, hugging him tightly. "I'm not leaving you." Sora lightly kissed the hands he was clinging to. "I love you. I know." Sora landed the Highwind in the Gummy hangar an hour later to meet an excited Chip and Dale, his chipmunk and Gummy engineers. "Howdy, Sora," called Dale as Sora and Kyrie walked down the landing ramp. "What you doing here? And who is that?" Sora smiled sadly at the 2 hyperactive rodents. "Heartless attacked our home," Sora explained, "and Axel told us to come here. And this is Kyrie, my—" Sora stopped himself and looked at Kyrie. "I guess I could call you my girlfriend, right, Kai?" She placed her hands on her hips and glared at him. Sora began to panic. "That is if you want me to," he said hastily. "I don't have to say anything if you don't want me to. I know we haven't actually gone on any dates." "Wait, why are you laughing?" Kyrie had doubled over in laughter as Sora was panicking. It was incredibly funny in her opinion. As Sora, Chip, and Dale looked on, clueless, Kyrie wiped tears of mirth from her eyes. "Oh, Sora," she said weakly, her eyes twinkling, "of course I'll be your girlfriend." She strode up to him and gave him a peck on the cheek. "And we could call those magic sessions and the simulator run unofficial dates," she said slyly as she strode down the ramp, her hands behind her back. "Sora's dating the princess?" Dale whispered to Chip, his paw trying to cover his mouth from her possible gaze. "Looks that way," Chip muttered from the corner of his mouth. Carrie walked up to the chipmunks and kneeled, offering her hand to them. Chip clambered onto him, pulling Dale up with him as Carrie laughed and twisted her palms so they could stand. She raised her hand to their level with his chin. Chip bowed. "Pleased to meet your acquaintance, Your Highness. My name is Chip, and I'm Dale," Dale piped up, also bowing. Carrie giggled nervously as she set them down. "Please, just call me Kyrie," she insisted. Chip and Dale saluted. "Yes, Your Highness," Chip said before he called himself. "I mean, Princess Kyrie." She wearily shook her head, standing up. Sora walked up behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're going to be saying that a lot, Kyrie," he told her. "Most people here are going to end up treating you like a princess instead of a regular kid." She sighed as they walked out into the garden, the chipmunks running off to work on their gummy. Kyrie gasped as they entered the courtyard. They had just come out of what was a hedge, but they had been sculpted into a shape of a castle. All around the garden there were other hedge statues that looked like the castle's residence, while shaped between them there were bountiful flower gardens bristling with blooming bulbous beauties. Kyrie ambled towards the nearest one and knelt down, drinking in the scent of the flowers like a stimulant. She could sense the fragrances soothing her mind and removing all her worries from earlier that morning. "These flowers sure are wonderful," she thought, standing back up. "That they are," Naminé said. Kyrie looked over to Sora, who was lazing on the lawn, ready to take a nap. "Come on, Sora," Kyrie called, amused that he would want to take a nap now. Sora leapt to his feet and walked to her side before leading the way to the audience chamber. "Sora, why are you trying to take a nap?" Kyrie asked while they were walking. Sora yawned wildly. "I don't know," he said thickly. "It must be the courtyard. Those perfectly manicured lawns are just right for napping in a nice sunny day, you know." Carrie giggled a little as they approached the audience chamber. She looked at the doors, her smile slipping. "Those are huge," she thought in awe. The whitewashed double doors were at least 20 feet high, with doorknobs at least 5 feet above her head. Carrie rounded on Sora. "How do we get in?" she asked. Sora chuckled to himself as they approached the left door. He knocked 3 times, and a regulation-sized door swung open. He motioned for a stunned Kyrie to enter first. She smirked at him as she entered. Annoyed he couldn't warn her, suddenly she was struck down in awe again. The audience chamber was huge. It looked as if the red carpet she was standing on stretched for a mile wide before reaching the throne. Sora walked up behind her, quickly eyeing the distance they had to cover. "Hang on," he advised. He quickly grabbed her around the waist. "What?" Kyrie started, confused. "Sora, what are you doing?" Sora grinned as he threw an arm around his back, clutching his side. Sora began running before using Quick Run. Before Kyrie knew what happened, she was 12 feet further ahead than a moment ago. Before she could even recover, Sora leapt into the air and began gliding above the floor, the wind whistling through her hair. Kyrie laughed aloud as she came to realize that he was having fun in making the long walk become far shorter. She looked forward towards the golden throne and saw several figures standing around it. Sora landed and let go of Kyrie a few feet away from the steps leading towards the throne. "That was fun," she whispered to him out the corner of her mouth before they ascended. "Glad you enjoyed it," he murmured. They approached the throne, where King Mickey's face gravely awaited them. Coming to attention, they saluted him. "Your Majesty," Sora stated, "we are here because—" King Mickey silenced him with a wave. "You are here because Heartless attacked your islands and Axel told you to leave, right?" They slowly nodded, confused as to how he knew. Mickey sighed sadly as he got off of his throne and walked towards them. Sora looked around to see who was standing around them. There was Donald and Goofy, a dog person who looked like Goofy except was in his teens, Daisy in a purple dress, and Queen Minnie, each of them whose shoulders had sagged, and they looked sympathetically at the 2 teens. Sora looked back at the king, who sighed again. "I'm sorry," he said before looking at them. "Where's Riku?" "He stayed behind with Axel and Yuffie," Kyrie answered. "Are they safe?" Goofy asked. Sora shook his head. "We don't know," he answered shakily. "We don't know what happened after we fled Cossacks and locked the keyhole." Mickey looked up in worry. "Oh no," he cried. "She's powerful. I hope they will be okay." Sora nodded. "I know," he said weakly, remembering the scope of her powers. Donald and Goofy looked at each other in worry. Neither had seen Sora so shaken. Not even when he had lost Carrie again. Donald's face hardened. "Don't worry," he quacked. "We'll handle her." Sora looked up at his duck friend in admiration. "Thank you, guys," he said warmly, nodding at them. Sora turned back to the king. "So what is Maleficent planning, Your Majesty? Why did she send Cossacks to the Destiny Islands?" "Yeah," Carrie added. Why didn't she say that my being at the same place as Sora would make her job easier?" Mickey looked grimly at the two. "Maleficent is planning to conquer the worlds again," he said. "She's also planning to use her two nobodies to help her round up the 7 princesses again and open a new keyhole to darkness inside Kingdom Hearts. With that power, she would be able to conquer all the worlds and make her empire of darkness. Only this castle would be safe from her horde to your previous effort to save the cornerstone of light." Sora scratched his head. "Talk about a major problem. Wait, how do you know so much anyway?" Mickey turned his attention to the only other teenager in the room. Goofy yucked. "This is my son Max," he said, placing his hands on Max's shoulders. Sora and Carrie nodded, wondering why Goofy's son was here. Max shook his father's hands off of him. "Yeah, I'm Max," he said nervously, "and my son is PJ. And my best friend is PJ. He is actually Pete's son." Sora and Carrie became shaken with shock. "You mean your best friend works for Maleficent?" Sora gasped before shaking his head. "Talk about déjà vu," Carrie said quietly. Max laughed. "Oh, don't worry," he said with a smile. "PJ was never involved in any of Pete's numerous attempts to cause havoc here, and he was very loyal to His Majesty. He's a double agent on our side. Pete only grabbed him and took him off to Maleficent's base when he was out on patrol because PJ is his son, he seems to think he can trust him completely." Sora folded his arms upon hearing this. "Pete may be brainless," he began, "but Maleficent isn't. She'll find him out sooner or later." Max sighed sadly. "I know," he said quietly, "and PJ knows too. He said his last transmission that he would try and get as much information as possible before he becomes paranoid that she or her nobodies are onto him. Then he'll get out as soon as he can and come here. He's a brave young man," Queen Minnie said, "and we are all proud of him." Donald, Goofy, Mickey, and Daisy nodded their heads. Donald looked at Sora and Carrie. "Well, now that you know what is going on here," he said, "how was life back on the islands during your break?" Sora and Carrie caught eyes and blushed, looking away from each other. These were their close friends, for crying out loud. Mickey raised his eyebrows as everyone leaned in. "Well, Sora started, his face bacon. Everyone leaned in further, Goofy even falling on Donald, neither noticing it. "Carrie and I are a couple now. If Donald and Goofy hadn't already fallen down, they would have." Carrie glanced at Sora and he gave a look that clearly said, "I had to tell them." Mickey, Donald, and Goofy started laughing whilst Donald and Minnie sighed as dreamy looks came over them. Max stood back, trying to keep his cool as he started thinking of a certain someone. "You two are perfect for each other," Minnie sighed. "After all you've been through, it would be kind of hard for you two not to hook up, right?" Donald broke from his laughing for a moment. "Of course they would get together," he quacked. Sora used to pick moments on our journey when he would start thinking of her, and he used to spend hours gazing at her charm when he thought we weren't looking. Carrie looked at Sora, who raised a fist towards the duck. "You really did that?" she asked. Sora lowered his fist as he turned to her. "Yeah," he said quietly, not remembering that they were alone. "When you weren't there, your charm was even more precious to me, reminding me of the promises I made, especially the one when we parted to come back to you. That's why I called it the Oath Keeper." Carrie slowly walked forward and embraced him, paralyzing him in a blissful kiss. I love you, Carrie said softly when they broke the kiss. Sora smiled sweetly at his angelic princess. "I know," he whispered, resting his forehead on hers. Donald sniggering at the two teens, and Daisy glared at him. "Isn't funny, Donald," she scolded. He immediately stopped laughing and gulped. Sora and Carrie looked and blushed madly as they remembered where they were. Mickey smiled sadly. "It's nice to know you two are together," he said slowly, "but I'm afraid Carrie is going to have to stay here." Everyone's eyes grew wide in shock. "He can't do that!" Roxas and Naminé fumed. Carrie flashed a look at Sora, practically screaming, "Remember Cossacks!" Sora looked at King Mickey. "Your Majesty," he began, "I understand you would like to keep Carrie safe from Maleficent, as she is one of the 7 princesses, but I am not leaving her. There is no way I could live if I ever left her again, even here at Disney Castle." Mickey sighed. "I know how you feel, Sora," he said. "It is the same feeling I get every time I leave the castle. But Carrie must stay here. Then we know Maleficent can't attain the power of Kingdom Hearts." "But your Majesty," Carrie pleaded, tears staining her cheeks, "you understand. Sora needs me. Roxas needs Naminé. They need both of us. Kosex's powers, it renders Sora helpless with pain and despair." Carrie looked down, rubbing her arm. "I'm the only one who can heal Sora," she said quietly. "If I'm not there, he may die or become heartless again." Carrie sniffled sadly as Sora rubbed her back gently, trying to comfort her while tears shone in his own eyes. King Mickey glanced around at those around him, each of them glaring at him. He threw his arms up in resignation. "Fine," he squeaked, but be it on your own heads. Sora, if anything happens to her, I'll hold you directly responsible." Sora nodded, the beginnings of a smile taking hold. "Carrie's coming with us," he thought in jubilation. He looked at Carrie, who was beginning to smile too, and kissed her. Mickey looked at the two sternly before his face melted into a smile. "I wouldn't be able to keep those two apart even if I tried," he realized. "Welp," he began, addressing everyone, "I hoped that Carrie would be staying here, so my original plan was for Sora, Donald, and Goofy to go out questing again. Some worlds still need their keyholes sealed, and there are more worlds out there to defend as well as the other princesses. I would have stayed here and coordinated it all, but since Kyrie is going out to battle too, plans need to change. We still have a team of 3, but since we have enough people, we'll have 2 teams. I'll go with Donald and Goofy in our new gummy ship, the Avenger, and Sora, you and Kyrie will go in the High Wind with Max, if Goofy will allow it." Goofy looked expectantly at Goofy, awaiting an answer. Goofy began puzzling it over. "I don't know," he said, looking his son over. "I don't think you're ready yet, Maxie." Max got down on his knees. "Please," he begged. "Can't I go? Sora's one of my 3 heroes. After all the stories you told me, you wouldn't let me go adventuring with him?" Goofy looked at Max's eyes. Being a dog person, it was easy for Max to utilize a puppy dog pout. However, that doesn't mean Goofy was any less susceptible to it as anyone else. "Aw, shucks," he said, rubbing Max's head. "I can't resist you when you do that. Just don't kill yourself, okay?" Max gave a hurrah and ran out of the audience chamber, off to tell his friends and equip himself at the Royal Armory. Queen Minnie looked at Carrie's outfit. She was still wearing the white halter top and jean shorts. Carrie looked at the Queen before looking at herself. Not the best outfit to be fighting in, she thought with a giggle. Queen Minnie took her hand and led her away, Sora following in their wake. "Come on, dear," she said. "Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather are here. They'll fix you up." Minnie led them away towards the high tower overlooking the courtyard, where several figures were bustling in and out of the gummy hangar. Queen Minnie opened the door to the tower, and Carrie stepped in. Inside were 3 good fairies, Flora in pink, Fauna in green, and Merryweather in blue. They each looked up at their entrance. "Well, look who it is, dears," Flora said. "It's Minnie and Sora." "And he brought a friend, too," Merryweather said knowingly. "Oh, it's just like the Prince and our Aurora." Sora chuckled, and Carrie shuffled her feet. Queen Minnie cleared her throat. "We're here for clothes for Carrie, ladies," she said, much how Sora was a year ago. The 3 fairies suddenly became excited, and before Carrie knew it, her arms were laden with several beautiful gowns and dresses varying of hues of pink, green, and blue. Carrie strained a little under the weight. She quickly dumped them on Sora before she could be overburdened. "I thank you for the dresses," she said breathlessly. "I'm sure they're very pretty, but we actually came here for an outfit I could fight in." The fairies were taken aback. "You're going to fight too?" asked Fauna sadly. Carrie nodded. "Yes," she stated. "Well, I'm glad at least one girl has the guts up to go up against Maleficent," Merryweather blurted out. "Too long has it been only men fighting. Nothing against you, Sora, or your husband, Minnie, of course. Or your husband, Minnie, of course." Carrie and the Queen giggled. Merryweather motioned to her fellow fairies. "Come on, girls." As one they waved their hands and streams of red, green, and blue shot towards Carrie. She closed her eyes as the warm magic washed over her. "Oh my," Flora said. "She looks lovely." Carrie opened her eyes. "I knew she would," Merryweather added smugly. Carrie looked herself over. Her halter top had become a white leather breastplate that ended just an inch or 2 above her belly button. There's a slit on the right side with 3 short leather straps and a brass snaps for ease of removal and donning of the jerkin. Emblazoned on the front was the outline of a pink heart and the 3 golden pointed crown in the center. The top points where the domes at the top met. Carrie looked down. Her jean shorts had changed into a very light rose skirt that ended just above her kneecap. She looked herself over before turning to Sora, apprehension claiming her. Does he like it? Sora just opened the door and shoved the gowns outside, so when he looked back and saw Carrie standing there as she was, his jaw went slack for a moment. Carrie giggled as he regained his cool and strode up to her. You look gorgeous, he said softly before kissing her passionately. Merryweather placed her hands on her hips. I knew it, she said as they broke apart. Carrie turned to the fairies. I have another favor to ask, she said. Since we're traveling on Sora's old gummy ship, and I have Donald's old room, do you think you could help me? Fauna gasped in excitement before Carrie could finish. You want us to help redecorate? She asked. Carrie nodded. Say no more, Carrie, Flora said. We're on our way. Carrie led the way for the 3 fairies, making sure Sora grabbed the dresses and began bouncing her ideas off them. Sora staggered into Carrie's room in the high wind, his arms laden with the many gowns the fairies had made for her. He peered his head around the mass of cloth in front of him to see the walls changing from blue into soft pink. The portrait of Daisy was gone, probably already taken to the Vingalot. The sheets were also turning pink, and the large dresser, mirror, and chair popped out of nowhere. Sora rolled his eyes. Girls, he thought. Better get used to it, Roxas said. You're going to be with her for a while. What about you and Naminé? Sora asked. He could tell Roxas started laughing. She isn't coming here. Your mind is my own personal bachelor pad. Sora rolled his eyes again. Glad you enjoy it. There's actually quite a lot of room in here, Sora growled angrily. Now you're just being mean, he thought savagely. Carrie stopped helping the fairies and looked over at Sora. Something wrong? She asked, seeing his face. He sighed sadly. Yeah, Roxas, he said, jerking his head upwards. Harry giggled a little and nodded. Sora once again noticed he was carrying somewhere around 10 different dresses. Do you know where I can put these? He asked. Flora looked around. Oh yes, Sora, she said, flicking her wand. You can place them in here. In there. A walk-in closet appeared in what used to be a wall. Sora mumbled his thanks and entered, dropping the dresses in a pile. He grabbed a hanger and began to hang each one up, never glancing for more than a moment or two, until he reached a particular fuchsia one. It was a long, slender gown that widened after the waist to give it a body around the legs. Matching it were a pair of rose-heeled shoes and a small silver circlet encrusted with the tiny, glittering pink diamonds. Sora stared at the ground in wonder. Carrie would look beautiful in this, he thought, as he gawked at the dress's beauty, and Jay dreamed of Carrie dancing in it. She herself peeped her head to see if Sora was done. She was about to say something when she saw him staring at the gown. Carrie smiled warmly. So, she thought, he likes that one? She poked her head back out and returned to her redecorating. Mickey was in his royal chambers, preparing for the journey ahead. He sighed suddenly as he shut his suitcase. I hate leaving her again, he thought. He heard a knock on his door. Come in, he called, turning around. Minnie entered, positively radiant in her pink gown. Mickey smiled sadly at her until he noticed a tight frown on her lips. Before he could even ask what was wrong, she spoke. Why didn't you tell them? She asked, crossing her arms. Mickey sighed as he turned around, not wanting to face his wife. I didn't want to worry them, he said at last. They finally hooked up, and they seemed happy together. I didn't want to ruin their happiness. Minnie approached quickly. Even more reason to tell them, she said. Carrie will do anything to protect Sora, and if you told them what Maleficent's really planning, you'll put Sora on his guard. Mickey spun around. Yeah, and make them forget to be happy together, he said almost angrily. Then he placed a hand on his shoulder. No, she said softly. You tell them they'll enjoy the time they spend together even more. I know every time you leave this castle your life is on the line, but because of the fact that I love our alone time together even more. She pecked him on the cheek. Don't you? The Mickey sighed and smiled at his queen. I do, but I still don't want to worry them. Minnie huffed. Although I don't agree with your decision, they will find out eventually, and they'll blame you for not telling them. Sora, Kyrie, and Max were standing next to King Mickey, Donald, and Goofy in front of the gummy ships they would take around the world. In front of them were Queen Minnie, Daisy, and a pretty dog girl in a turquoise shirt and navy shorts. King Mickey turned to those standing beside them. "Now remember, guys," he began, "we visit the worlds and seal the keyholes. We don't want another heartless fiasco like a year ago." Each of them nodded their heads in determination before turning back and waving. "Good luck," Queen Minnie called. "Don't forget our date, Donald," Daisy yelled, as the other girl smiled and waved. Sora, Kyrie, and Max turned towards the island as they would be departing first. "Wait a second, Max," the king said. Sora looked at Max, who shrugged his shoulders and sauntered back. The king whispered something to him, and Max grimly nodded his head before returning to Sora's side. He took one look at Sora's face and answered the unspoken question. "He told me to be careful," he said. Sora nodded and looked up at the top of the ramp where Kyrie was waiting. "Come on, you two," she called. Sora rushed to her side, Max on his heels. Reaching her, they all nodded and filed inside the bridge. Sora sat in the captain's seat and began flipping switches and pressing buttons. The engines came online with a roar, and Sora grabbed the wheel, ready to send them streaming out into space. Only that isn't how it turned out. Without warning, the repulsor lifts failed as the ground opened up underneath them, sending them tumbling straight down. Luckily, Sora and Kyrie were wearing their seatbelts, so they were kept in their seats. Max, however, didn't buckle up and quickly face-planted into the ceilings of the glass bubble that topped the bridge. Sora looked straight as he saw that they were being careening out down a tunnel. Before he could take in more, they were suddenly in space. Sora grabbed the wheel again and accelerated them forward in order for them to be out of the way for the Avenger. Due to the acceleration, when Max fell, he missed his chair by a few feet, cussing and feeling his jaw. Max stood and plopped himself back down, Sora and Kyrie howling with laughter. "Ha ha," Max said. "Very funny." Sora slowly stopped laughing as Kyrie continued to snigger at him. Minutes later, the Avenger came plummeting down. A light on Kyrie's terminal began to flash as a quiet siren began to blare. She looked hesitantly at her console. "Sora," she asked, concerned, "what does this mean?" "It means we're receiving transmission, Kyrie," Sora answered, a slight chuckle evident in his reply. "Press the small blue button under the light for audio and the small green one for video." Kyrie pressed the green button, and the screen slid out from the console. After a moment of the gray screen, the screen flashed life, and an image of Mickey, Donald, and Goofy appeared. "We're going to explore the new worlds," King Mickey said. "Where are you guys planning on heading first?" Sora looked around at his companions. "Actually," he began, "I was thinking of heading to the Radiant Garden and then Twilight Towns first. I thought we could go around to the worlds I've already visited to make sure they're fine before exploring." Sora glanced around and saw Kyrie and Max were nodding in understanding. Sora would want to make sure his friends were okay first before making new friends. He glanced back at the screen. Goofy and the others were nodding too. "Okay, Sora," Goofy said. You go make sure our friends are all right and put them on guard. Tell them and Donald I said hi." "Good luck," Donald called before the king cut the transmission. The screen slid back into the consoles, and Sora looked out of the viewport. The Avenger, a massive white triangular vessel and with a raised rectangular bridge that the two spherical shield generators placed upon either end of stilts, and its four circling mini-ships. The black ships with triangular fins on each side of a sphere in the middle pulled alongside them before streaking off. Its three engines glowing blue. Kyrie looked up at Sora. "So," she said, "the Radiant Garden?" Max punched the coordinates of the world up in and looked up at his captain. Sora nodded before rising from his chair. Max and Kyrie followed suit. "It's going to take roughly 6 hours to get there," Max said with a yawn as they filed into the cabin. "What are we supposed to do in the meantime?" Sora smiled. "Talk, read books, watch movies, play video games, practice in the simulator. Whatever we want, really," he said, plopping down on the couch. Max sat down next to him and eyed his gaming console. Sora raised his eyebrows at the teen next to him. "You want to go?" he said, picking up a copy of Star Wars Battlefront 2. Max grinned. "I'm a veteran at that," he said, pumping his chest. "There's no way you're going to win a space battle Sora took his challenge with gusto. "You sure about that?" he challenged as the screen loaded. "I've flown this ship in combat against hundreds of Heartless ships and haven't received a scratch. You want to reconsider your fate? Bring it on," Max said. Kyrie, meanwhile, was watching from a chair as she settled into a book. Boys, she thought, as she watched Sora constantly destroy Max's TIE interceptor from an Incom T-65 X-Wing space superiority starfighter. Sora's really good, she thought a few minutes later, unable to concentrate on her reading due to the shouts, explosions, taunts. Although, she continued, he would have died a few times if Roxas weren't standing behind him shouting out Max's positions. As Sora was about to win the game for the Rebel Alliance faction, she noticed the score limit. He suddenly posed a question out loud. "Did you guys notice that the King's ship and May's ships looked a lot like the Imperial Star Destroyer and TIE fighters?" Carrot looked up. "Yeah, it did," she said before chuckling. "You don't think Chip and Dale had become Star Wars freaks, designing the ships based on their favorite Star Wars ones?" Max laughed as Sora destroyed the Imperial lander he was piloting, thereby winning the match. If they build a Type B Mon Calamari cruiser and name it the Liberty, then we'll know for sure." He turned to Sora, who had a smug look on his face. "You're really good, Sora. Normally X-Wings would be bantha fodder for a TIE interceptor because of my increased maneuverability." Sora grinned and rubbed his nose. "That's why I'm the best," he laughed before looking at Max. "So, who's that cute girl that was watching us leave, Max?" Max blushed and turned away. Kyrie marked her page, which wasn't that far, and leaned in. "Don't get any ideas, Sora," she growled playfully. Sora waved his hands in front of him in defense as he was about to protest his resentment at such a comment. Max spoke. "That was my friend Roxanne," he said, not meeting their eyes. "I really like her, but I don't know if she likes me that way." He suddenly put his head in his hands. "What do I do, guys? You should know." Sora and Kyrie looked taken aback and glanced at each other. Neither of them expected their new friend to come to them for dating advice. Sora sighed sympathetically. "Well," he started, not knowing the best way to put it. "Did you ask her not to come?" Max nodded slowly. Kyrie's eyebrows rose. "Then she likes you," she explained. "If you told her not to come and she came anyway, then she still wants to know you." And basically she said that she should wait for you to come back, at which point she would make her feelings known to you. Kyrie laughed a little. "Basically the same thing happened with us, Sora." He laughed sadly as Max slowly raised his head. "Yeah," Sora joked, "except it was more of a promise to come back and we found each other away from home. It still took a while for everything to come out." Sora nodded and that Max's head was raised, his face fixed in a look of disbelief. Sora placed his hands on his friend's shoulder. "It'll be fine as long as you get home," he said. "Yeah," Max said slowly. "Thanks, guys." Titus and Waka were on patrol around the school's immediate area. Titus had a long blue crystal broadsword with a notch at the end called the Brotherhood, and Waka was carrying a black spiked blitzball called the Catcher. Their nerves were frazzled as they contemplated the events of the previous night and today. "So," Waka began to himself, "tell me again what in Yevon's name is going on?" Titus sighed and shook his head. "Even I can barely remember, Waka," he said. "Let's see. Last night the party beings called Heartless attacked us with only Sora, Kyrie, Riku, and Miss Yuffie fighting them first while Mr. Axel went to get weapons for the rest of us. Then some chick called Cossacks showed up, began taunting Sora and Kyrie with that invisible Roxas person. Then Mr. Axel arrived and told Sora and Kyrie to seal Keyhole and leave to a place called Disney Castle and in something called a gummy ship. The Cossacks did something to Sora, causing him to writhe in agony. Kyrie healed him with some kind of light, and they took off into the sky. Mr. Axel and I were busy fighting the creatures in front of them, and Riku and Miss Yuffie were holding back Cossacks with a keyblade and an oversized shuriken, and Mr. Axel fired a column of flame to prevent her escaping. Titus put his hands down to his chin, trying to remember the rest of the events. Then at some point, Cossacks vanished in a swirling black thing, and we fought the Black Devils until daybreak. And now we're on patrol to make sure that they don't harm those who can't fight. Waka nodded and looked at his watch. "Our time's up," he said. "Let's go report at the mayor's office." Titus nodded, and they began walking. He looked around sadly. A few buildings had been destroyed by the Heartless, including the ice cream parlor, and 2 people had gone missing. One of them Bob. Not that anyone really gave a damn about Bob, Titus thought, after what he tried to do to Kyrie. But it's just sad that no one can find Mandy. She wasn't at school today, and her parents don't know where she is. They continued walking, finally reaching City Hall, a gray multi-tiered building with the flower gardens in front. Titus opened the door and strode towards the mayor's office, walking by his side. Inside the office were Sora's mother Anne, Kyrie's parents Seymour and Janet, Riku, Yuffie, Axel, the rest of Titus's Block 4 class, minus Sora and Kyrie, of course, and the Blitz team. Seymour had his head in his hands, but he looked up at their entry. "Stats report," he ordered. 12 Heartless appeared in our 2-hour shift. Titus began wearily. 10 destroyed, 2 escaped. "Those things give me the creeps, yeah?" Waka said. "I mean, they were black all over, and those sphere heads, they look like blitzballs except for the antennae and beady yellow eyes, and those claws are sharp." He said, pointing to a cut he had received on his arm. Riku sighed and pulled out a potion, healing Titus of their wounds. Sophie looked concerned at their teachers. "What are those things, really?" she asked aloud. Most of the others nodded their heads. Axel, Riku, Yuffie, and the parents heaved a collective sigh. "Denizens of darkness," Riku stated, once again explaining everything about their adventure. "There is darkness in nearly every heart, except for the 7 princesses of hearts. We'll talk about those later. When a man named Xehanort opened a special door to darkness, he unwittingly allowed the darkness in people's hearts to take form. When the darkness overwhelmed the heart, a being called a Heartless was created. Xehanort first hypothesized that the creatures did not have hearts, and after several tests he was able to conclude that the Heartless are really hearts surrounded by darkness. You cannot truly slay them," Yuffie continued, without a special weapon called a Keyblade. The Keyblade unlocks the captive hearts and dispels the darkness surrounding them. John scratched his head. "So no matter what we do, we can't kill those things?" he asked glumly. Riku looked at him. "Not entirely," he explained, "but you can scatter the darkness around the heart. It will take a long time for the darkness to gather around it again and form a new Heartless. However, it isn't all in vain, you see." Riku summoned Way to the Dawn in his right hand. "I have a Keyblade, as do Sora, Kyrie, Roxas, although I don't know how good he will do, and King Mickey." The whole class and the Blitz team suddenly grew very excited. "Great!" George exclaimed. "So where are Sora and Kyrie?" "They're gone," Axel said. "Gone?" Brittany cried. What do you mean they're gone?" Axel smirked as Sora and Kyrie's parents looked down sadly. "I mean they aren't on the islands anymore," he stated. "Well, where are they then?" Mike growled. Axel laughed. "They should be at Disney Castle by now," he said. Yuffie and Riku breathed sighs of relief. "That's good," she said. "They'll have met up with King Mickey and probably started ridding the worlds of Heartless while stopping Maleficent." Blank stares greeted Yuffie's words. Yuffie threw her arms in the air exasperatedly. "You seriously didn't think your world was the only world, did you?" The people began shaking their heads. Riku let a chuckle. Guess they couldn't tell you were from another world, eh, Yuffie?" he said. Everyone, excluding those who already knew, looked in shock at Yuffie. "You're from another world, Miss Yuffie?" Fred asked. "What's it like?" Yuffie smiled at them. My home world is called Radiant Garden," she said, before bouncing on her heels. "I wonder how Sora and Kyrie are going to react when they arrive and find out I sent Leon, Aerith, Sid, and Merlin the picture of their first kiss." And that was Chapter 9, The Plan. I'm Anime Guy Kurosaki1. If you wish to be a part of the story, message me on Twitter at AnimeGuy01 or find me on Skype at AnimeGuyKurosaki1. May the grace of the valor protect you.